When they were confronted with these discrepancies, Brazell admitted to killing Braxton. He admitted that Braxton was trying, remember this child is 2 years old, okay? 2-year-olds don't have a voice for themselves. They can't always acknowledge the needs that they have or the pain that they're having. So in the morning yesterday, Braxton was trying to take down a blanket that was covering a window, which is a very common thing for a child to do. And Brazell came into the room and punished him for doing so. What he did was, and what he admitted to, was picking up Braxton by the leg and dangling him in the air. He then took a belt and began to hit Braxton with it repeatedly all over his body. He also, while holding him by the legs, threw him against furniture, causing significant injury to his head, where he had a fracture to his skull, as well as a laceration above his eyebrow. His eyes were swollen and bruised. His body was swollen and bruised. And then he proceeded to drop Braxton from about 2 or 3 feet above the ground onto his head onto a hard floor. After that, 911 was not called. It was not called by Brazell. It was not called by Lopez. Brazell told Lopez what occurred and then left the residence to bring another child to a medical appointment. So Braxton was left in the care of his mother by herself, who is there to protect him, and she did not. Instead, she noticed that he had shallow breathing and was struggling to get breaths, and with that decided to give him a bath and then lay him down for a nap. She continued to see that his breathing was not good and called Brazell back to the residence, at which time Braxton was no longer breathing. They both spoke with one another and fabricated a story about Braxton being attacked by a dog on a walk. And that was the information they initially provided to law enforcement. So after being confronted with those discrepancies, Brazell admitted to killing Braxton. Brazell and Lopez were both arrested on first-degree murder and child abuse charges. I just really want to reiterate that this is an unimaginable nightmare for a child. You talk about kids experiencing nightmares when they sleep, and this child lived it every day. And it was in the hands of those who are supposed to protect him. His mother is supposed to protect him. Boyfriend who's in the home is supposed to protect him, and they did not. They did absolutely the opposite of that. So we mourn with those who knew and loved Braxton, and we want to remind the public, if you see something concerning, say something. Oftentimes, your eyes are the best information that we can get to get somebody the help that they need. I'll take questions if you have them.
Were there any prior circumstances of child abuse? Had anything been reported before this?
To our knowledge, there have been no prior reports of police involvement or involvement with the Department of Child Safety.
Was there any evidence on the children's body, the child's body, of prior abuse, broken bones that had maybe healed?
Yeah, so when officers arrived, they observed bruising in all different levels of healing, and medical professional also explained that. So there were bruises of different sizes, different colors, showing us that there was a history of abuse.
Did you check with California to find out if, I know that's where they came from recently, to find out if maybe there had been some kind of calls?
Yep, as far as our knowledge, there has been no involvement with the Department of Child Safety.
Here or there?
Right.
You mentioned another child. Was that child show any signs of?
There were 2 other children in the home. There was a 2-week-old, which is the child of both Lopez and Brazell, and then there was another 2-year-old who is a child of Brazell, and neither of them had any injuries.
And the man wasn't this child's father, though, correct?
That's correct. This Brazell was not Braxton's father.
Have you been in contact with Braxton's father?
To my knowledge, Braxton's father is not involved in this picture.
Where are the 2 other children going now?
The Department of Child Safety responded to the scene and took custody of both the 2-week-old and the other 2-year-old.
Was this a house or an apartment? And did
was-
neighbors ever talk about hearing screams or kids yelling or crying like that?
To my knowledge, we do not have any reports in relation to that. We haven't had any calls, and that's what we're saying is if you do see something or you hear something, please say something, because we can't always get that information if we're not there to experience it ourselves.
Do either Lopez or Brazell have any prior criminal history?
Lopez and Brazell both do not have a prior criminal history.
You mentioned that incident that day and all the bruising. Do you guys have a date of when there may have been other instances in the past of child abuse?
It is our understanding this has been a continued series of events for this child. It hasn't been a specific date where it started. It has been an ongoing thing for this child.
Does it appear that Brazell singled out Braxton rather than his own 2-year-old?
It seems that way. The other two children didn't have any injuries, and Braxton had significant injuries and a history of them.
So the other 2-year-old in the home was Brazell's.
The other 2-year-old in the home was Brazell's, yes.
Was it Lopez's as well? I know the 2-week-old was.
The other 2-year-old was not Lopez's.
So did they discuss about how they felt about the baby and how they bothered, why they would do so much, harm to this little one?
We don't have information in regards to how they feel about the other children versus this child. I can say that our department is incredibly sorry for this loss of this child. I mean, we just cannot imagine what this child experienced on a day-to-day basis.
You mentioned that you have, you can tell that this has gone on for a while. How did you find that out? How were you able to figure that out?
Well, medical professionals were able to look at bruising and prior injuries and determine stages of healing in regards to the bruises as well as the other injuries.
Could you provide a timeline from the time Brazell left the house and Braxton was in the care of Lopez to when they did eventually call 911?
I'm not entirely sure the specific timeline of events. I can tell you when the child came to the hospital. Based on the temperature of the child, he had been deceased for 1 to 2 hours before getting there.
Why didn't firefighters pronounce him dead on the scene?
Because firefighters want to make every effort to revive a child. We don't ever want to say that we didn't offer every service, every one of our abilities, every one of our efforts to save the life of somebody who deserves it.
Did Lopez give any reasoning as to why she didn't call the police once Brazell left? Was there abuse there? Was there any reasoning behind that?
To our knowledge, there's no history of abuse between Lopez and Brazell. It sounds like the story was fabricated between the both of them. They had created this plan together as a couple.
Is that why she's also being charged with first-degree murder?
That is correct. You can be charged with first-degree murder if you are involved in the commission of a felony which ends in murder.
No indication that she was threatened by Brazell to be complicit in this, or that he had threatened to hurt her if she had done anything, or call the police?
There is no indication that she was threatened by Brazell to be injured or anything else.
Have you had an opportunity to talk to the mother of his child? Did she know of any possibilities that this was going on?
To my knowledge, we have not spoken with that mother. The Department of Child Safety came in and removed those children yesterday.
Do you have a timeline on their relationship when they started dating?
I don't have a timeline on the relationship. I can tell you they have a 2-week-old baby, so approximately 9 months and 2 weeks at minimum.
Careers, what they did for a living, do we know, did they both work outside of the home?
So she's unemployed. He's had a position for approximately 6 months.
Just to reiterate here, there are a lot of services that are available for people that are in abusive relationships, or services that are available for children that are in abusive relationships. This is the very beginning stages of this investigation. So it's going to take our detectives some time to get all the parties involved, questioned, spoken to. We can tell you that they did confess. So they did admit to what took place in the home. It did take a little bit of work on our detectives' part to get them to the point to admit to what took place in the home, but they did make that admission. We just cannot stress how horrific a situation this was for our first responders. Once again, we can tell you that some of our firefighters are seeking emotional and mental help because of what they witnessed in this home, and some of our police officers as well. So we just hope that by putting information out like this, that more people do step forward, come forward, and when they do hear or see something that just doesn't look right, to report it to police. We want to thank you guys for your continued coverage on this, and anything further would have to come through the county attorney's office.
Just one more question. Are
Yes.
you guys looking for any witnesses or people who knew them to come forward and talk to you guys about what was happening in the home?
I think that that's a very safe bet. We would like anybody who maybe heard or saw something throughout any time frame to please come forward. Again, this is very preliminary. Our detectives are still actively working this case. They still have to go through a bit of information and talk to several people. But yes, any of those neighbors, anybody who may have pieces of information that can give us an idea of how long this was going on, we do want them to come forward.
Any indication that this was premeditated beyond just Braxton pulling down that curtain, that they had been planned to do this for a while?
There's nothing that is saying that they have been planning this, but I will say that there was definite signs of abuse that have been going on for some time here. During the investigation, he admitted that that form of punishment had happened prior, and that was the typical form of punishment that he was used to providing this child.
Jose, you mentioned that, you always ask, if you see something, say something. You have neighbors, though, kids yell and scream and cry and breathe. How do you know if what you're hearing is something that you need to make a phone call on?
I think that right there is just enough for you to see something or say something. I think children do yell, scream, and cry, but there are differences in a lot of the tones of those yelling and screaming and crying situations. Leave it up to the professionals to figure it out. If something feels wrong to you, we'd rather have you give us a call and let us go in there and check it out than the possibility of another 2-year-old losing their life.
And you don't have to worry about whether they're going to know it's me, because PD will go and very...
You can come in and talk to us confidentially. All of that will be taken into consideration. We would rather make sure that another child doesn't go through something like this.
I know you said it took some time for them to confess. How long did it take to get that confession?
It's a couple of hours. I mean, they were very stern in keeping with the story of the dog bite, and the more that detectives pressed them that the stories weren't matching, as well as the injuries weren't matching that of a dog bite, eventually they did come forward.
And both of them?
Yes.
Did they have a pit bull?
No. So the initial story was that they were walking in the park and a random pit bull had knocked the child down, caused a head injury. We can tell you that there was surveillance in that area, surveillance cameras, and there was nothing to substantiate that story.
Were they remorseful?
I don't have that information. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
No, there wasn't somebody that called. I left mine in the car. It's so cumbersome.
It does really make
It's so much easier. I just think so.
And all of this was sent to your desk, so the desk have a press release, they have the Form 4, and they have the